Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are talking about what has been called the first big blockbuster of 2026 and one of the most optimistic space movies in years. That's right, we are talking about Project Hail Mary. We're going to start things as we always do with a quick icebreaker question before jumping into a spoiler-free review of the film where we'll provide a verdict, and then we'll close out the show with a spoiler-filled discussion. Science light, science heavy. You got to stick around to find out. Joining me today, as always, he is the Rocky to my Grace, or maybe I'm the Grace to his Rocky. My co-host and award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, LaRon Chapman. LaRon, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and also to go on this space odyssey with you. I guess sans Ryan Gosling, although Brock is a good stand-in for Ryan Gosling.
I mean, basically Ryan Gosling in my book.
The resemblance is striking. Yeah.
I think so. And the charisma. Don't forget the charisma.
Yeah, he's got the charisma for
sure. Well, I guess really our next guest needs no introduction. He is basically Ryan Gosling, as we've just described him. Who else better to go into space and make BFF with a space alien? The Brockness monster of art directors, Brock Lay. Brock, welcome back. Also, thrilled to know that Ghostface did not get you. I'm frankly very relieved.
I'm still on the mend. I feel better. Those compliments for the Ryan Gosling, I think, are going to get me over the top. That was too kind of you, and you guys are great schmoozers. Happy to be here.
We only say nice things to our friends after they've survived a Ghostface stabbing. So, we're thrilled you're still here, Brock. Great to be joined with you virtually this time. Glad you make it. And do you guys like this? Woo! I learned that's how you say hello in Seattle, I guess. I don't know. It's a new thing I picked up.
I'll try that next time I'm there. Yeah. I'll see how it goes over.
Say that to Paris Burris next time you see her and see what she says back. All right. Well, gentlemen, very excited. We have a very special guest. First time here on the Cinematic Schematic. And, we love movies. We're really into science. We're especially into science fiction movies, but this person has worked in the field of science. Very excited to be joined by Stephanie Smith. She is a former social media head over at NASA. Formerly, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, hello, hello. I am delighted to be here with you and to discuss one of my favorite intersections in the universe between science fact and science fiction.
Oh, excellent. We are huge sci-fi head. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Sci-fi is my comfort genre more than anything. That with a little bit of fantasy, but I think on this show we're really big on any flavor of science fiction, horror, or fantasy we can get our hands on. That's for sure. Listeners, viewers, if you enjoy this conversation, you can really help us out by heading over to your preferred podcast app, giving us a rating, giving us a review. We are now on YouTube for those of you who've been listening to us on audio for years. And if you haven't already, head on over to YouTube, subscribe, like the video, ring the bell if you want to get notified when new episodes drop. Doing all this will help us get discovered by more listeners like you, or perhaps by more Rockies in the galaxy just like you. Well, everyone, I thought it might be fun to sort of kick off our show with our icebreaker question. I tried to come up with what do we do here? We haven't done a space movie in a while, actually. I was thinking about this. It's been a hot couple minutes since we've had a good one. So I thought a nice way to break the ice would be to ask the question, what role would you play on a Hail Mary style mission? And I would say, if you can, for listeners, pick a movie. You could say the movie, or if you want to be super brownie points, bonus points, you could name the mission in the movie. You could name the role you'd play on the ship and perhaps your biggest concern about the mission. For example, I'd be an oil driller on Freedom and Independence mission to blow up the asteroid in Armageddon. My biggest concern would be, as all Americans would be, losing Bruce Willis to the asteroid. LaRon Chapman, my co-host.
Yes.
What role would you play on a Hail Mary style mission?
Okay, so full disclosure, I was a English and history person in school. So science was always a challenge for me. I was a straight A student, but I will say that math and sciences were the ones that I struggled with the most. So with that said, not being necessarily a scientific person, I do love science fiction movies and movies that explore space and the vastness of the universe at large. But I am, however, also a writer and who loves and values and understands the power of communication and words and language. So that being said, I feel like I would be a fellow linguist. The way I'm describing it is discovering how to communicate and creating a teachable language with extraterrestrials before tensions lead to a war mission in Arrival.
Nice.
So my biggest concern, and this is a little bit dark-sided, but go with me here, is that I would probably empathize with the extraterrestrials. I may, unfortunately, join their cause to exterminate the human race because I think that we have kind of we've done enough to this world. We've done enough to this universe. I feel like it's time for someone else to try. I don't think we're learning from a lot of our mistakes. I won't speak for everybody. I just think collectively as a human race, we've done a lot of harm to our Earth, and maybe the extraterrestrials would have maybe a better chance at creating a civilized civilization. But we'll see. We'll see.
Wow, LaRon, I was so with you until you're like, humans, we should probably just give up. That's the opposite of this movie we're talking about today, LaRon.
I know it.
That is why it's so, we're going to get into it. That is why this movie is so vital. But, also,
Did I mention Begonia was number 9 on my top 10 list of last year? So that, it's right there. It's right there.
And you'll notice that he has not cut his hair. He's still communicating with the mothership.
Yeah.
Oh, snap.
There it is.
Brock, I think, all right, guys, it's time to abandon ship.
LeBron
do you need one
exterminate the world.
No,
we
gotta go the other way. One of us.
Yeah,
we gotta get him to re-empathize with
Join us. No,
empathy, LeBron. Empathy.
No, you're
That's
right. You're absolutely right.
That said, Brock Lay, I have an opening for a co-host on this podcast, so I had no aliens allowed. Oh no, that came out wrong. Sorry. You know what? I'm going to stop digging the hole so it gets deeper and deeper. Brock Lay, what role would you play on a Hail Mary style mission?
I feel like I would fall into mine. I don't feel like I would be heavily recruited, such as a LaRon or a Stephanie, with their vast knowledge. I feel like mine would come in the form of being asked to transport maybe the savior of Earth or mankind, a la Clive Owen in Children of Men. I feel like I would be more of a survivalist that just relies on instinct and good friends, good connections, and some seriously well done oneers in those shots. But mine would be more Clive Owen, just kind of falling into it and being like, "Here we go,
dude. Let's get that movie. Hey, Brock, you want to make that movie? Like Children of Men, but in space? Oh my gosh, that'd be freaking amazing.
You've already got your log line. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Sold. Children of Men, one of my favorite movies of all time, and Clive Owen, underrated. Great pick, Brock. Stephanie, what role would you play on a Hail Mary style mission?
Okay, so like LaRon, my background, my formal training, while it started in biochemistry, ended up in history and in theater. So my degree is in history, and I have spent the better part of my career, whether that was working at .com startups or being a print journalist, an online journalist, and then eventually doing 15 years of social media at NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'm a translator. I translate between very scientific and technically minded people and people who are not, and trying to find authentic touch points. And more than that, the cultural references that make something relatable and resonant with the intended audience. So I could see myself being like a combination of both Lieutenant Uhura, communications officer from Starship Enterprise, and C-3PO, our protocol droid, which I guess means I'm going to look like Dot Matrix from Spaceballs.
Hey, at least you can know that in the event of your demise, that your head can be sold at an auction for $1 million.
There you go.
C-3PO's head from Empire just went for $1 million this last week. So
Wow.
great choice, great investment for your ancestor or your descendants rather. So
I'm putting
good
all my
choice.
eggs in one basket too. The kid better be happy.
I love that. Hey, I think that's great though, because we need translators. Across. I love that you say you have to come with like the more like practical, like day-to-day person speak. You bring that to the cultural moments and connect that to the science and the highly technical. I've been working with IT folk, and a lot of engineers lately in my day job, B2B, and that is a very underrated skill, being able to be a person who can understand highly technical and actually translate to, okay, yeah, but what does that mean for like a normal person who does day-to-day things? So very important in the realm of science, of course. I was kind of torn between two choices. I thought, Event Horizon, that was a pretty cool space movie. Loved that one. And, then I thought, no, I don't want to be the Doctor, because one of two things will happen. One, I'll just snap and go crazy and hijack the ship and get possessed by a demon. And that's not great. The other thing that could happen is I'd be responsible for replacing everyone's eyes that were ripped out due to said demonic possession. Not a big fan of that one. So I thought I'd take another route. I want to continue with the theme of empathy. So I'm going to get on the Lima project from Ad Astra, or Dad Astra, as I like to call it. And I would be the therapist for, in this case, Brad Pitt, because really, he really needed a therapist to keep him from going off the deep end. My sole mission would be to keep him from going off the deep end. My biggest fear and concern would be losing the pilot to unresolved daddy issues. No one wants to have to face their daddy issues in the depths of space. They just need someone to listen to them so they can work it out. So that's my choice.
So true.
I'm just worried about the Captain Kirks and Leia Organas of the galaxy, using the wrong story at the wrong time and getting us all offed, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty. I mean, especially if you had a whole crew to consider. Communication, very important. You and Laurent are onto something. I'll be the therapist for the communicators.
Where have you been all my life?
And Brock, of course, will be the man who's like pushing us to go to stick to the mission, stay focused.
Yes. Good vibes all the way.
Good vibes all the way.
Vibes
Listeners, viewers, what mission would you choose? What role on said mission would you play? And what would be your biggest concern? If you're watching us on YouTube or Instagram, you can go ahead and comment below the video. Or if you're listening via podcast apps, send us an email at thecinemetropolis@gmail.com. We'd love to get your feedback, input, and a little bit more about your perspective on space voyages. Well, I'm really excited about this next piece because we're going to, Stephanie, this being your first time, and you have such a, as you've kind of like laid out here, a really important, I would say, role in the terms of like scientific exploration, discovery. As a big, cinephile group of movie watchers here, I have a lit degree, so, not exactly science. I would love to hear a little bit more about your story, like, and why films like the movie we're talking about today, Project Hail Mary, are really so important to our broader culture, but not just on the cultural side. Why is it also important to sort of for the advancements of scientific space discovery, space exploration? So maybe just to kind of kick us off, if you could walk me through what led you to pursuing a career in the scientific field?
Okay, so if somebody had told me science communication was a job when I was 17, I probably wouldn't have taken quite such a circuitous path to get where I got. But that said, if I hadn't started, in high school doing improv comedy, loving the sciences, thinking I wanted to do an MD, PhD and do drug discovery, so that's what I told the schools that I wanted to do biochem, and I went to Harvard and I did a year of essentially pre-med weeder classes. I did these science classes and I saw my life just unfolding in the laboratory pipetting, and I didn't want it. But what I really loved was doing research, communicating information to other people, whether that was, in an entertaining way or in an informative way. And so that's when I made a pivot to get a degree in history. Yeah, I worked for travel guides to try to help people from one place understand another place and why it might be meaningful for them to go there. Um, I went to work for a .com startup. I loved the engineers. Spoiler alert, I ended up marrying a software developer I met there. This was at Idealab, a .com incubator back in the late 90s. Um, I was part of the marketing department. I had gone there to write and produce websites, but we got sold for our technology. And literally overnight, I didn't have a job anymore. The only thing left to write were software documents. And because I enjoyed hanging out with the engineers and I could still speak meaningfully to the business people, I got in this in between role and took that forward into journalism, took that forward then into NASA, sitting between the scientists and the engineers on JPL robotic space missions, and eventually at NASA for all of the lab's activities, um, meeting the people where they are, in this case on social media, because reporters weren't telling our story for us anymore necessarily. So many newsrooms had cut their science and technology reporting that we had to start going to people directly because it's in the NASA charter. It says that the agency will share its activities and the results thereof, so missions and the data with the widest practicable audience. Very elastic language, doesn't say how you do it. We ended up finding that social media was super effective, but it had its limitations and things like, 140 characters, you got to distill. And so
Yeah.
you're not only writing news posts, you're writing science haiku and being able to hit the id just enough to get people to click through, read the rest of the story, watch the video, download the PDF, check out the website, come to the live event. It pulled on all of these things from my past that I didn't know that I was going to use. The translation skills, the love of poetry, the love of performing. It all came together. So you know what, kids, the side quests, that's what it's all about.
It sounds like you would have been good on this Project Hail Mary project. Have you heard of it? I think you would have been pretty good up there.
Well equipped, certainly.
I would have
I mean,
definitely appreciated the onboard computer system and its vast quantities of input.
oh man, that's amazing. Well, and as we'll talk about more in the movie, there's a certain translation being a very key skill for Grace in the film that you would be uniquely qualified, and also have the patience and technical know how to do. So that's super super cool. I do want to ask you just to pick a little further at that. Love to hear about the unique challenge of the public facing side, again trying to distill highly complex ideas into a tweet. Oh, that's crazy hard. Crazy hard, I'm sure.
Or a series of them, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes you can't get the whole story into this tiny little space. And so you have to pick a facet. And it's not one size fits all. Well, NASA's active on 14 different social media platforms. The people who gravitate to those platforms are all going to be very different. And
Yeah.
so we didn't take a one size fits all communication strategy. Something that would be deeply meaningful to somebody in their midlife um, might lead to a certain way of phrasing or a certain piece of creative attached to the post on Facebook that we would never in a million years use on Instagram, and definitely not on Reddit. And you can swap those around. So it was about really thinking, what what does this mean to that group of people, and tailoring the tone, tenor, and timing of the message for each platform.
Yeah. Incredible. Again, you have to knowing your audience or audiences or verticals, they're super essential. What was your favorite part? Like, so on the communication side, that's super cool. What was your favorite part about sort of working with the people who were like in the deepest science of the scientific study? Like what was that process like? Was it just like you get a brain dump and you kind of had to decipher it? Was it like a fun
Oh,
research project? What was that like?
yeah, it depends on the field. Astrophysics that is a mind bender out there. And so talking with the astrophysicists, and oftentimes I would like need to pull on other members of our newsroom. We had beat areas. And so there was a woman whose beat was the universe, literally, who was very, very good at breaking things down. And so I would pepper her with questions if I couldn't get directly to the scientists, to try to wrap my head around, what is it that we're looking at? Explain these gravitational waves to me. And oftentimes I would end up using the educational materials that we had made for elementary school students. So this idea of Ryland Grace being so good for Project Hail Mary and having come with a middle school science background, to me, does not sound far-fetched at all. It means that he really, really understands the science behind, what he's trying to explain, and he can break it down into easy to understand words, or activities. Like there was an activity after the discovery of gravitational waves that, I'm not kidding, used a tray of Jell-O, a laser pointer, and 2 marbles to simulate the collision of 2 black holes and how it shook space-time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool.
That's super
If
cool.
it works, I guess,
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
and it was like, I watched that demo and I was like, "Oh, I get it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool."
Yeah.
The metaphor there is
Like
so
you
incredible.
just said it, and then I imagined what that would look like. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Right,
Does
you
the
drop
job.
if you point the laser pointer through the Jell-O, and you've got a detector. In this case, it was a piece of cardboard, I think, but you could see the dot on the other side, and then you drop the 2 marbles on the Jell-O, and you watch the dot move. That's Lego. That's the
Mm.
detector right there. Only instead of a 9 by 13 pan of lemon Jell-O, it was a very, very long tube in the desert.
Okay.
Oh man, that's so cool. Wait, all right. Well, you mentioned there we're teeing up towards the Project Hail Mary piece, but you also mentioned that you have a love and passion for like poetry, for example. What in terms of like film and television, did those play sort of a role in your interest in like pursuing any sort of the scientific component growing up?
Absolutely. And I would point to one science fiction and one science fact. So the Star Trek universe was very important to my nerdy little heart growing up. I watched the original series reruns with my dad, and sometimes he would bake chocolate chip cookies. And I'm not saying I'm Pavlov's dog, but I have those inexorably linked in my mind that it was all good. We're watching Mr. Spock and eating hot cookies. It was great. And then when I was in junior high, I was just giddy for Next Generation.
Yes.
But I
Next gen.
also watched Scientific American Frontiers on PBS with Alan Alda. And little did I know that this was going to be the start of a real passionate second career for him in science communication. I don't know if you guys know this, but he founded a school within the State University New York system. It's the Alan Alda School for Science Communication. And
I did not know that.
I didn't either.
yeah, he uses tools. It's not just him, this whole group of faculty that at this institute they lent his name to, teaching scientists and engineers to be better listeners and better communicators, not necessarily to be out there being all like waka waka funny, I need a non-geographic location, but to genuinely listen to the questions that are coming to them and answer them in non-scientific language. Now, there are a lot of words that have a very strict definition for scientists that have incredibly different connotations for people who are not. So you say like theory of relativity, theory of gravity. Like it just theory. If you're not a scientist, you don't know how rigorously tested something has been to get to that point. It just sounds like you're winging it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting because as a writer, something that comes to mind to me, especially if I'm writing about whether it's like I'm writing about police officers in a story. I was like, I'm not a police officer, so I don't know the jargon that they use. Or if you're making a political thriller of sorts, and it's like there's certain things that they use. Like I think it was Aaron Sorkin who mentioned this. He was like, you just got to give them enough information to kind of make it intelligible to a general audience, and they'll go along with the ride because they're not really, unless they're in those fields, are gonna be like, well, that doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Like they're typically, if you
Yeah.
do, you know what I mean? Like some
Right.
some effort there, then there's definitely a way to
And
let the audience in and make them feel like they understand, even though they may not truly understand all the details. Yeah.
I feel like we got really lucky. Like the science community got really lucky with Andy Weir because he does have a technical background. He used to work for Sandia National Labs, which is something I found out when he came and spoke at JPL after the Martian book had come out. The Martian movie was coming. JPL ended up hosting the junket as they did for Project Hail Mary. And somebody in the audience asked, like, how did you get JPL so right? How did you get this, what it's like to be at a federally funded research and development center? And it turned out he'd lived it. He had that lived experience. And I think he's so passionate about science and about engineering that he works a lot of real stuff into his storylines that trickles down into the screenplay and what we see play out in the finished film. And he also knows enough about storytelling to decide when to break those rules and when to choose things that are not accurate. Although, like the scuttlebutt I'm hearing from the scientific community on Project Hail Mary is like they've got a very nitpicky thing that they're like, that's wrong. And it's honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it seems so small to me that I'm like, that's all you got? And it's the centrifuge. He doesn't balance the centrifuge. He just puts the samples in one side. You ever had your tires balanced? Right?
Yeah.
You got you got to move the little weights around so that you don't get this wobble when you spin it. Same thing with a centrifuge. Same thing with a spin stabilized spacecraft. You move balance masses around, and there's literally a spin table in the clean room so that you don't get up there and wobble, baby.
Yeah. Well, now every time I watch, that's all I'm going to see. But I wouldn't have known that otherwise.
Movie ruined. I'm glad we know this now before we review the film, right?
Star rating's already going down.
Yeah.
I have beef about the EBA suit, but we'll get there when we get there.
Well, I think this is great though, because I think the last question, we're talking. You're talking about sort of like how the scientific community is viewing movies like Project Hail Mary, and Laurent, I think that was a great note you made about like. The average viewer is never going to understand all the science. They just need enough to understand the principles, and that was a thing we'll talk about more as it relates to Project Hail Mary. But that was the thing I love about The Martian, for example. I still haven't read the novel, but the movie, the thing I was really impressed by it was, I'm like, I don't understand that. I know there's probably like chapters on chapters for how the stuff actually works, but what was so impressive to me about that film in particular was how it gave me enough like. How does he grow crops on Mars? Well, I don't know. And then he goes over like, oh, you could do this, this, and this, or and then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm following that. I know what these things are. I can track that. And then he would, encounter like a malfunction or an issue, and he'd say, oh, here's the problem I encountered, and here's how I fixed it with this other scientific thing. It was super impressive. And I guess that kind of brings me to the question, just kind of like more broadly, but also Project Hail Mary, Stephanie, like why is Hollywood putting films like this in the theaters so important in terms of sort of like driving a meaningful conversation about space exploration and scientific discovery?
It makes it exciting. It makes it a cultural touchstone. I mean, right now, this is the film to see, right? There's a certain social currency that you have, and you want to go on social media and you want to talk about it with your friends, whether you are just, a fan of Ryan Gosling because he's so darn likable and the camera loves him so much, or whether you love space and science, or whether you just need a dose of optimism, or you want to see something beautiful in IMAX, which is cool. Or you have bored kids at home for spring break and you're like, all right, everybody in the car, we're going to the movies. Whatever it is that gets you into that theater, and then you're talking about it later, that becomes this incredible invitation for NASA to join the conversation, not in like a well, actually kind of way, but in a relatable way, to be able to be like, okay, so you saw these technologies or you saw these images. Well, guess what? Here's the real mission that this is based on. Not Project Hail Mary, but like when we get to Adrian and we're looking at Adrian, the look of those storms is almost identical to what the Juno spacecraft was seeing at the poles of Jupiter. It's different color, but the swirling patterns, it's a dead ringer. There are some shots looking out over the horizon while Grace is out doing the collection spacewalk, where you can see the aurora in the upper atmosphere. It's not surprising to me that astronaut Don Pettit was one of the science advisors that they brought in. He's this longtime NASA astronaut who is an absolutely phenomenal photographer. And one of his big hobbies, in what little free time he had on the International Space Station, was to take things like long exposure photos from space or pictures of aurora. And so all those visuals in the film are informed by real life. And NASA can then talk about like, okay, why is that green and why is that pink? They didn't just make up those colors. That's right.
Mhm.
But when there's something that's wrong, like I look at it as the little seed, the little grain of sand that makes the pearl, because it's the starting point of a meaningful conversation. So in The Martian, the big, tense moment that causes the crew to abandon Matt Damon's character is that windstorm, right? Mars has windstorms. They would never be able to impart the amount of force that you see in the film, because the atmosphere is 1/100th as thick as Earth. So it could be blowing really, really fast, but it can't impart any force. You wouldn't have your rocket tip over or be in danger of tipping over. Be far more likely that they would lose communication with him because of a burst of energetic particles from the sun, but that's not cinematic. It
Yeah.
doesn't read as, oh my gosh, the ship is going to tip. We got to book out of here now. So I understand why, from a cinematic perspective, the choice is made. For storytelling perspective, it's just way more visually dramatic. But it gave NASA the opportunity to have a conversation. And once we can get people in the door with one conversation, whether it's about a movie that they saw or an eclipse in the sky, that's the gateway to a real relationship.
Yeah.
So this is why there is an office with a film and television liaison who reviews scripts and decides which ones are going to be worth NASA's time. Usually you can tell which ones those are, not only by the end credits and who they thank, but does it use the real NASA logo or not?
Oh, that's a good call out. Yeah.
If
Man.
it's very different or it's highly altered, that is a visual signal that maybe the agency felt it was important to be involved for a somewhat, but they're maybe not all in.
Yeah. I get that for real. That's a great visual cue. Um, Well, we have a lot more to talk about. Adaptation, I think, is going to be a big theme, especially like when we get to the spoiler section of the podcast. But I love that you're kind of outlining, even when there are differences, whether that's differences from, like in this case, the source material, but also from the actual science, and the scientists are calling it out. Just the fact that like there is a disagreement creates a space for us to all talk about it. And for most of us who are wildly uneducated about any of the nuances here, you get to learn something new and kind of like create that curiosity that I think movies like this are, have really, or at least for me, it's always been a big draw on these movies that are actually trying to do science and space exploration for real. It's like, ooh, I would love to learn a new thing.
Yeah, it's kind of an invitation to learn more, for sure. Yeah.
But it doesn't have the same kind of like heavy trappings of like, watch this lecture, you will learn.
Yeah.
You gotta put the cheese. You gotta put the cheese on the broccoli.
You gotta put Ryan Gosling there. You gotta dangle him to Ryan Gosling to get people to show up.
You gotta put the Ryan Gosling in a spaceship.
You gotta say he's a middle school teacher, put him in a spaceship, and people will show up.
I mean, and the little glasses and the fox sweater don't hurt.
On that note, now that we've had a chance to learn more about, perspective of NASA, for someone who worked from NASA and also worked in the field, let's get to our review of Project Hail Mary.
The sun is dying. You are the only scientist who might know what this says.
I'm just a teacher at Grover Cleveland Middle.
You have a doctorate in molecular biology. I need you to come with us. This is Project Hail Mary. The sun is not the only star dying. Every star was infected by its neighbor, except one.
Why?
We don't know.
Well, according to IMDb, Project Hail Mary is described as a science teacher wakes up alone on a spaceship. As his memory returns, he uncovers a mission to stop a mysterious substance killing Earth's sun, and that's an unexpected friendship that may be key. So, Project Hail Mary is based off of a 2021 novel by science fiction author Andy Weir, as we've already mentioned. And I would say before Project Hail Mary, he's perhaps most well known for the 2011 novel The Martian, that was later adapted for the big screen by director Ridley Scott and writer Drew Goddard in 2015. The film starred Matt Damon. This film, Project Hail Mary, is directed by, I would say, a relatively, I'm going to use the word beloved. People will love their movies. Phil Lord and Chris Miller. They are most famous for their work in animation. They've directed the 2014 film The Lego Movie, which was a huge hit at the time. People love that movie. But also the Academy Award-winning Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse movies. They produced those. They have not directed those. They've also produced a ton of other animated films, including the sequels to the Lego movies. In live action, they've directed the 2014 film 21 Jump Street and its follow-up 22 Jump Street. I was very surprised looking at their filmography, as much as their names have been attached to so many films. Didn't realize that the last live action film they actually directed that saw release under their name was 22 Jump Street. So over a decade. Most notoriously, they were fired from Solo, a Star Wars story midway through that production, and they were replaced by Ron Howard. And we all on this podcast know how that one turned out. I do want to note that Drew Goddard is also back as the writer. So he adapted the Martian, and he's back to adapt Project Hail Mary. This film stars Ryan Gosling as Ryland Grace, as we already mentioned, but also Sandra Hüller. We have big Sandra Hüller fans here on the podcast as Eva Stratt. And listen, I have to ask before we get to like the review. Ryan Gosling, are we in on him as sexy middle school teacher without a love interest? Yay. Brock, what are you thinking? Yeah. All right. I mean, you're right. He is Brock. You and him are one after all. So
yeah. He's like, who, me?
This is the film. This film had a production budget of $185 million, and this is produced by Amazon MGM Film. And I want to call that out because Amazon Studios has been releasing films for a while, but Amazon MGM is a relatively new umbrella for them since they acquired MGM. And frankly, they've had a series of box office flops. So this is their first big hit. So Project Hail Mary was opened to $80.5 million domestically in its first weekend, with an additional $60.4 million overseas. So $141 million worldwide total in the first weekend. It's also continued to be a huge hit in its second weekend, and we're now heading into weekend number 3 by the time people are listening to this show. So it is Amazon MGM's biggest film to date. Really quickly, before we get into reactions, who here on this podcast has read the novel Project Hail Mary?
Present.
And accounted for.
Beautiful. And so, Laurent, that makes you and me the layman here.
We're the layman.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about. We're just watching the movie. With that said, Laurent Chapman, what did you think of Project Hail Mary?
I like this a lot, actually. Without like necessarily being like bowled over by it, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it was a very fun spectacle that has a lot of heart. It has its heart in the right place. I think that and I think that it's going to be like a young kid's version of what maybe 2001: A Space Odyssey was, or Gravity. And I think that Gosling is such a movie star. He really carries this 2 hour and 36-minute movie. I call it a feel good space hang movie on his shoulders. And I think that for me, honestly, my only gripe, and this is probably just a me thing, to be honest, is that it is the humor in this is laid on very, very thick. So when we get to more kind of tense or emotional beats, sort of I would say that because of that the humor is laid on very thick. There's a kind of we're talking about optimism here. It is a very optimistic movie, and I don't think there's anything wrong with putting optimism in movies. I just think for my taste, when watching a science fiction movie like this, typically there's enough tension, where I'm really genuinely locked into the stakes and in that regard. And I felt like, because I was having such a feel good time, and the sugar high of the humor between Ryan Gosling and the extraterrestrial character Rocky, at times this almost felt like a kid's film, and I'm not sure if that is what the novel was aiming for, or what the movie was aiming for. But I was like, I could see this really appealing to a very young audience. Maybe the runtime might kind of creep up on them, at the 2 hour mark. But for the most part, I felt like I could show this to my little nephew, and I think he would love it. You know what I mean? Like, in that regard. But that being said, I do think it was very visually wondrous, and I think that the crafts in particular are very strong. The score I really enjoyed. And I think that overall, this it put a smile on my face, so I think overall I enjoyed it.
All right. Laurent coming in very pro with a couple of qualifiers. Brock Lay, I'm going to turn to you first. First of our two book readers, I'm really interested to hear kind of where you guys come down on this. What did you think of Project Hail Mary?
On what I liked, I think one of the strongest parts of the book Rocky, like how to make a extraterrestrial character that has no features or way of actually communicating. Funny, in the book, I feel like they carried that over pretty well into the film. He looks kind of like what I would have thought, acts exactly like it. And I thought it was really good the way they portrayed him. I think that probably could be why it leans towards kids more, because he is more playful and fun, like Laurent was saying.
Full puppet, by the way, completely no CG, fully done as like a puppeteers, which is really interesting.
And it was incredible. They did a really good job. What I didn't like was some of the parts that were left out from the book. I think there's major character development aspects to the book that really flesh out Gosling a lot more, and not even being a big science person, like just in terms of like not knowing things, like NASA and all of that. I loved in the book how thorough everything was, and the reasons why they made all of these decisions was because of science, because of math, because of that's what needed to happen in order for this entire thing to succeed. And so I didn't like that there were aspects of that were left out, explaining these certain decisions that carried them through the film. And I feel like that really lacked on, because I feel like it made everything feel too easy. Like the stakes weren't as high as they were in the book. And I felt like that was in the film. Like it just felt a little easier than what it really should have been.
Yeah. We'll talk about more in spoilers. The third act moves. There's a certain sort of like the pacing and the momentum at the end of Act 2 and Act 3 was really different than I expected. And I totally see where you're coming from on like it's easy. It's like, oh, all of a sudden there's a problem that presents itself that then is very quickly resolved with some explanation, but we'll get to that.
Sorry, is that the low altitude beeper going off, getting closer to spoiler territory?
No, you're good. No, you're good. All I'm saying is, no, you're good. You're good. Good. But no, all I'm saying is there are conflicts that occur, and I do feel like I agree with you that they are solved with some form of ease, versus, we don't spend as much time as I'm imagining the novels actually trying to work it out, like with math and whatnot. Stephanie, what did you think of Project Hail Mary?
Okay, unabashed enthusiasm over here. I loved it. I went and saw it. I've seen it twice this week. First time with 3 friends and one 12-year-old who had read the book and was a big space fan herself. She had opinions, definitely, about the chunks that she's like, oh, they left a lot out. And if you want to see them show their work, definitely read the book, because there is a lot of problem solving that happens in a really logical way that might not be the most fun to watch on film, or it might have made that film, 4 hours long. So I understand why they made the choices that they did. Am I internally a 9-year-old? Yeah, probably. And frankly, all of the greatest scientists and engineers I worked at JPL and NASA in my 15 years there, and now I'm making my transition back into civilian life. The ones who stayed curious and who stayed enthusiastic like a kid, like unabashedly enthusiastic, were really, really, really good at their jobs. And that enthusiasm for science and engineering that is cool, and finding inventive solutions to things with stuff you can get at the Home Depot. That whole sequence from the film made me think of some of the engineers I knew who worked on Spirit and Opportunity when they were trying to come up with a landing system. And they went and bought a bunch of stuff off the shelf at the hardware store to mock up ways of testing different things. So it felt authentic to me. And I know that I'm coming at this from a different point of view than most of the people watching it, but I appreciated it. And I also appreciated the optimism. It's a bleak time in a lot of ways. And so if I can go sit in a theater and feel good for 2-hour and 36-minute runtime, I am here for it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the enthusiasm, and I've also seen the movie twice. I saw it at an early presser. It was just standard, and I was like, nah, I need to see this. And my wife also wanted to see it. So the second time I went with her and saw it in a Dolby screen, and it actually did make a notable experience difference, just the level of immersion and the amount of screen you're able to see with the sound. And I will say this, especially coming off of Laurent's icebreaker question, and Stephanie, to say your point, we need optimism in anywhere we can get it, frankly, at this point, but especially in our movies. And listen, I know that in general, science fiction is known for being sort of like oftentimes the one that's a little more like of a downer in terms of how it's exploring a lot of different themes and how it's using science to sort of explore dark sides of humanity. It's really nice to get a movie that is just really clearly enthusiastic about the science. There's not a bad guy. There's just a problem that needs to be solved. And I appreciate that it's a story about how compassion, empathy, collaboration, and like just innovation with science is sort of the answer to helping solve the problem. I think that's really a key theme, not unlike Arrival, which Laurent, you mentioned earlier. I think this is a vital type of story we need. And I thought Gosling was a lot of fun. I will say, just in terms of like experience of the film, I thought the pacing was a little jarring at times. And Laurent, that sort of ties to the tonal component you were mentioning earlier. the jokey stuff worked really well for me for about the first hour, but by the time we get to hour 2, it had sort of deflated the stakes a little bit. That doesn't mean I wasn't laughing at it or whatnot. It's just there's a couple of times where it's like, oh, things got real serious. And they kind of worked themselves out relatively quickly, which to Brock's point, that didn't ruin the movie, but I do feel like in terms of like the moments I feel like I think there was like one time in the film, we'll get to it in spoilers, where I was genuinely emotional, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I think the movie was well executed. Everything after that, I'm kind of like, it's going to work out. Like, they'll figure it out, you know?
And it's hard to find that balance a lot, specifically. Like when you're in a high stakes situation, if you undercut it with a really like LOL joke, you're kind of like, wait, am I supposed to be feeling like stressed out or happy right now? And you know what I mean? And find that, and I think for the most part, they did a good job with that. There was just some instances where I felt like this is a moment I would have scaled the humor back a little bit and let the natural tension of this moment kind of play out. But
I think so.
That's me as a writer director making like little like tonal gripes, but in general, in this movie, obviously, what put a big smile on my face. I thought it was again like a warm hug in many ways. As you mentioned, maybe kind of a film we need right now, with again all the cynicism and darkness in the world. If you want to smile for 2.5 hours, that's probably a good thing.
Well, and not only just the distraction component, it's like, oh yeah, you're getting the air of like getting positivity, but like I really think it's important that people see that no, we can problem solve. There are ways to problem solve without violence. Like, there's another version of this movie that goes very differently when he meets Rocky, and that is just not, this is the kind of story we need to remind to lead with a lean into curiosity with compassion, not fear. So all that's I would say that's like a small gripe and more of a nitpick than it is like a huge like mark against the movie. I will say my bigger complaint is, again, does not ruin the movie, but I did feel like we lacked a lot of interiority for Grace, Ryan Gosling's character, and I suspect we'll get to it more in spoilers, but I do understand that in the novel it's a lot more clear that he's lost his memory at the beginning of like he wakes up with basically no memory of what's going on. And the movie, the first time I saw the movie, I did not pick up on that. I was so confused for the first 20 minutes. Round 2, it tracked a lot better, but I still felt like in general, there was a lack of interiority to the character that I really think would have helped me kind of like understand some of his decisions a little better. Didn't ruin the movie. I think Grace is super charming. Ryan Gosling was great. And at the end of the day, the ideas he represents and the way he problem solves are more important. But there were a few times where I was like, I'm surprised he felt that way. Or, why is he? I don't really fully understand why he's making this decision here. And so there was a little bit where I wish I could have gotten just a little more. But overall, I'm very warm on the film. I think this is a great time at the theater. What did you guys think about, Lauren, you already mentioned some influences. I'm thinking of Interstellar as a major one for this, coming in on its,
100%.
I mean, Stephanie, I'll throw it to you. I mean, just kind of, especially given your background, like, what did you think about the way the film depicted space, especially without green screens?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, man, all right, where to start? And I'm thinking about Interstellar 100% right now. There are things there were visuals in the film that we could talk about in the spoiler part that were very reminiscent of like the Tesseract scene when you're in 5-dimensional space in Interstellar. Don't mind spoiling older movies.
12 years. It's 12 years old. We're past the point.
Statute of limitations has passed.
Right. You reached it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Caleb, you're absolutely right that we do get a lot more of the internal dialogue and the character development in the book. The first, I would say, 5 minutes of the film is 10% of the book. They really collapse that timeline. There's so much more that's going on. And it's really funny the way that it's written. It's got pathos. I don't know, for anybody who's had weird medical or any kind of memory issues, it is a lot clearer than what you see in the film. As are a lot of the other technical solutions that we see to problems, all manner of scientific problems. So, other films, Gravity, for sure. The Martian, which is, this is the same DNA between Andy Weir and Drew Goddard, right? You've got this story of survival. I liked that there is it's not just one character for so much of the film. Not that Matt Damon isn't great, but I enjoyed the sort of buddy movie parts of things. Should put it that way. Other space movies, I don't know, the robotic arms, the AI, we've seen that go in very different ways in other films. You look at 2001, that onboard computer is nothing like HAL.
No,
Thank
No.
goodness.
no, not at all.
And there was a lot of hand waving about some of the technology, both the propulsion system on the ship and the life support systems, where I'm like, is this set now or is this set in the future? And
Yeah.
Yeah. That was I guess my one other like nitpick, and I felt less annoyed by it in the second time. Just I should say I thought The Martian did a better job at explaining, giving us enough science for things to really track logically from a plot perspective. Whereas this movie, the first time I saw it, there was at least twice where I was like, yo, I feel like I looked away from the screen for like 2 seconds and I don't know how they got to this point. Specifically with how he's communicating with Rocky. That one was, again, we'll talk more about it, but that was like a big, wait, how did that happened really fast,
there was some hand waving. Don't worry about how we did this. The book definitely goes into and Fourier transforms and linguistics concepts that are that's I don't have a degree in that.
Yeah.
I know
In some
enough to
ways, it
know what I
feels-
don't know.
In some ways, it feels like the film is just more focused on the relationships between these two characters than it is about the mechanics of everything. And I understand that maybe the book is probably a little bit more balanced in that way in terms of drilling both of those
maybe
points home.
too far the other
Too far
way.
too far the other way.
and
Okay, yeah.
right and
I just-
and the pendulum, like I'm in it, like I've spent a lot of time professionally trying to understand dense scientific concepts, and I would get to a point where I would just be like, okay, I'm just gonna have to take your word for it because I'm not gonna stop to look this up.
Yeah.
I just feel like it takes away from Gosling, like how smart he really is and some of the things and how they rush it. Cause like he does do a lot of like really smart findings and experiments and things that to help him problem solve. And I feel like they kind of took that away from Gosling's character in the movie to kind of where he doesn't like, I don't know. I just feel like he doesn't have as much, but
Yeah, as much depth of knowledge
of
there.
knowledge that he really does.
Well, on that note, I do want to touch, I do want to, I mean, we've already mentioned it, but sort of there is that tension between like the comedy and the drama stakes. Brock, I'd be interested to hear, especially, having read the book, like how well do you think the film balanced the two between like science versus silly? Like, I mean, obviously I'm hearing like you're not super crazy about how they handled Grace. Like overall, was it more of was the sort of like sillier or lighter tone more of a plus or a detractor for you?
Is kind of a detractor, like, and I know like in the book there is humor because like Rocky trying to connect with Grace, how he would say things or react to things, he would try to say them, where Grace could understand them, and it was humorous in that moment because just of how the language barrier between them and how he would try to be reassuring or say something in like a stressful, tense moment. And that would kind of bring a little bit of humor to it in that way. But I feel like they leaned a little too far in this one. And Gosling, as great as he is, I think maybe leaned a little too far into it with the humor as well. And then it kind of took away from some of the balancing of high stakes sci-fi. I mean, it just, again, like just little things like you said, like, how did you get to this decision, this conclusion to do this? And they skipped, like, I'm not saying, because I agree with you, Stephanie, it would have been a 5-hour movie if they had to explain
or
everything.
just montage on montage on montage.
Some things I'm like, they really skipped over that, and it would have been helpful for viewers who haven't read the book. And so I think like But if I would have never read the book, I probably would have enjoyed the movie much more.
Yeah. As I said, I've heard from a couple of people who've read the novel, so you're not alone in that, Brock. But having not read the novel, there were certain things I got caught on, but it wasn't like enough. I think like there was a lot more hand wavy, but overall, like the things that work about it, for me, like were a lot more. They connected with me a lot more deeply than the things that were like kind of like, I would have liked this a little bit better. But
Well, kind of like what Stephanie was saying earlier, like in terms of like this being like a precursor, like for somebody that may want to explore more of this information.
Yep.
That's typically how I treat adaptations. If I find that a movie that I really want to see is also a book, I'll watch the movie first so that I don't compare the two. Because typically, if I do it in reverse, the book will deepen my love for the movie and not the other way around.
Yeah, sure.
There's obviously some instances where this was not the case, like Harry Potter or things like that, where obviously as a kid I read those things, deeply. But yeah, I think in this regard, like I'm more curious to read the book because I've now seen this movie and to learn more about maybe some of those gaps that are there in the book. I mean, in the film.
Well, I think Lauren, that's a great point too, because it's worth talking a little bit about adaptation here. And again, Stephanie or Brock, feel free to weigh in, particularly as it relates to Project Hail Mary. But when it comes to adaptation, Lauren, I kind of follow up more of your school of thought. Like, here's what I've come to. There are the people who are constantly, anytime, especially when it comes to from books to basically anything else, there's some people, and I understand where it comes from, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but they'll get really hung up on all these things that are missing. And sometimes I think they're right. You're like, oh yeah, that seems like a really important thing. You kind of just X'd out of there, But there's other times where it's like we're saying we can't have a 5-hour movie, or even if you have a 5-hour movie, that's not going to be a fun 5 hours to watch. Like it's not paced the same way. So when it comes to adaptation, like the way I always look at it, I would love to hear what you guys think about this too, is you really have to consider the strengths of the media. Like, when you're reading a novel, you can really get in someone's head, especially if it's like a first person, written from the first person. But even if it's written from like a third person point of view, you can see more of the players on the field and sort of like spend more time with the characters in a way that you can't on like on a big screen. You've got, like Stephanie was saying earlier, you got people's butts in seats. How long can you really hold their attention? If you're doing a bang up job, 3 hours at the most, and it has to be like a home run. If you're hitting 3 hours, it's really more like 2 hours. For the most part. And so you have to make certain choices. What is going to be engaging for a 2-hour experience? And then you also have things like television where it's like, whoa, it's a TV show. Actually, we've got 8 hours, but every episode has to be paced like an episode versus like a movie where it's like one thing. I also lean on video games a lot. There's a lot of video game adaptations that are happening right now. And then like video games are a whole other thing. It's really hard to adapt them oftentimes because part of what makes them so unique from a storytelling perspective is the fact that you are engaging with the story in real time. So I don't know. I say all that to say when approaching adaptation, I think this movie generally makes very smart choices in terms of who are the characters, what are they about, what is cinematic space, what is the human connection? Well, it's mostly Grace out in space with Rocky. So like, let's lean into the fact that he's building this relationship with an alien. Let's have fun with it. So I don't know. I having not read the novel, it seems to me as a film goer that the choices they made were probably the smarter ones, even if I do wish there was a little more depth there.
I have spoiler stuff that I can't say that also pertains to that. So it's not just surface level.
Okay.
But I had a very sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, please.
I had a very interesting way into the book. So I saw the teaser for the movie and then knew nothing about it and didn't know what Rocky was in that teaser because it was just like I think him pushing his claw into the mesh xenonite ball, and so I was like, oh damn, that looks kind of crazy, kind of scary. So I bought the book. In reading the book, because we're talking about it, so we all know that it's a buddy movie. In reading the book, whenever he first makes contact with Rocky. I read horror novels. That's basically all I read. So I bought this one thinking it would be like a sci-fi horror novel in space. And so you think that there's going to be the antagonist alien that, creates like something hard for Gosling or for grace to overcome to then save Earth. And then so in the book, whenever it ended up being just a nice alien that who like befriends, Riley Grace, and they go on this like crazy adventure, it like kind of wish they would have done the movie like that, not showed Rocky a lot for people who haven't read the book, and just hooked them with Gosling and like the space and like the drama of it all. And is there an alien? What is that? What is that creature character thing? I don't know. Kind of like how I always come back to it. From Dusk to Dawn did it. They thought it was a heist movie, but then it's a heist vampire flick. Like, what was this?
Yeah.
What if this was Alien Save the Earth, but then it comes a buddy film saving the Earth? I don't know. Just kind of flip it. Because go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off there.
I was just saying, like, how I came into it was just like very crazy. So I thought it was going to be one thing, and it flipped it on its head, and I had this whole other thing thrown at me, and it was really fun.
I do kind of wish they had marketed this slightly differently, where either they like made Rocky a much more of a question in terms of his motives, or not shown Rocky at all. I know he's kind of the hook for marketing though, so it's tough.
They gotta sell those toys though. Kids want those Rocky toys. So I agree with you though. It would have been nice. I mean, I will say, I think before the TV spots that have come out post release, I wasn't aware of that. And so I like the subversion of the fact that the alien becomes a friend and not a foe, in that regard. But I agree. Like now, if you look at a TV spot, it's like cutesy Rocky all the time, like in the trailer. So they're like trying to get those tickets, sold to little kiddos too that may see that and say, "Ooh, that looks cute or fun," so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Stephanie, you were about to say something, we're talking about like the adaptation. What's your take there?
Oh, I wanted to touch on my biggest sort of suspension of disbelief moment was the character of Strat and her plot role, where she is basically this sort of like Deus Ex Machina who makes bureaucracy go away. And like it
yeah.
And the very fact that the character name is Strat or Strat, I guess, if Dutch in the book and German in the movie, it is an interesting strat to move things along and to get the nations of the world and the science community all rallied under one person to one common goal. And honestly, there's a bit more believable bureaucracy that happens in the book that doesn't happen in the film. Film doesn't have time for it, right? And you want to get to the story, you want to get to the buddy relationship, you want to get to some, to these amazing places in space. But like they're absent that character. I don't think that you could ever pull something like this off, even with having the stakes be all of humanity and maybe a third of the planet is going to die if you're not successful, if you don't throw this Hail Mary pass.
Yeah, there are a lot of times when we saw Don't Look Up a few years ago, and that's one that at this moment in time feels like the much more realistic reaction of the world at large, and which is why I think having movies like this released are very important to remind us all that like sometimes
if we work together, look what we can do.
Look what we can
accomplish together.
Yes, exactly. Well, much more to get to in spoilers, I can tell. So let's just move right along. Before we do, though, give a letter grade verdict. So how would you rate this film? What letter grade would you give the film? And should people see it? Brock Lay, I'll start with you. What letter grade would you give Project Hail Mary?
I will give it a B. If I had never read the book, I probably would have gave it like a B plus, A minus. But I'll just leave it at that. B.
And should people see it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. People should totally see it. It's a beautiful film. It's a funny film. It's a heartwarming film. Yes.
Yeah. So B. I take the B. LaRon Chapman, what letter grade would you give Project Hail Mary?
I'm also going to give this a B with the added footnote that I think that this will have like a high rewatchability factor. Since it is it moves very fluidly and it's consistently entertaining throughout. We kind of touched up on the green screen aspect of things that they didn't use any green screen here. I think that is something that added a nice texture and weight to this. So I think that, because typically you would use that as kind of a crutch to, unfortunately, a lot of movies just can't bring to life certain things in the material world. So it does feel like in that regard, they did a really good job of making everything you're seeing really feel immersive and like you're there. So I'd give it this a B, but I do think that it's a highly enjoyable film that you could put on and again, get your sugar high, if you will.
Sugar high, you need your optimism fix.
Yes.
Get unlocked optimism. Stephanie, how about you? What letter grade would you give Project Hail Mary?
I'm gonna give it an A for amaze. I am in.
There it is.
It's got space.
Well, there it is.
Yes. Fist bump. I'm not saying it Rocky style because I don't want things taken out of context. I enjoyed the science. I enjoyed the visuals. I enjoyed the humor. I enjoyed Ryan Gosling. I enjoyed the practical effects. There's a warmth to puppetry that I don't think that you can get from CG. You don't fall into that uncanny valley of this is weird and it's not natural and it's not right. I don't know. I want to live in that world. It seems very nice. And to visit it for 2.5 hours in a situation where you could go see it with your mom and your dad or your friend's kid or anybody in between. I'm here for it.
Yep, my kids loved it.
I love to hear it. I love that it's a wholesome family film you can take that's actually about something. It's not just like a distraction. Like there's like a real like weight to the story. Yeah, no, I'm gonna lean. I have oscillated. The first time I saw it B-, but the second time I'll go up to a B+. Seeing it on the Dolby made a really noticeable difference. And I also was able to follow. I was very confused about, especially in like the first act. First time around. Act 2, though, or the second time, tracked way more clearly to me. And I think for everything you guys have said, all the upsides, the practical effects, Gosling, the score, the visuals, man, there's just so much that works about this film. And the fact that we're able to get a film at this budget about space exploration at this point in time where Hollywood is really an incredibly volatile state. I feel really lucky. And to see it so well received puts a big smile on my face because that means we're likely going to get more of them, God willing. So overall, B+, highly recommend people check it out. See it on the big screen, really, like seriously. Go to a theater and watch it. It not only does it deserve your money because it's a good movie, but it is a very clear ad. If you're a person who only goes to the movie 3 times a year, make Project Hail Mary one of them. I'll say that right now.
Looked way more expensive than $180 million.
It did. No, seriously.
And the visuals in the theater, I'm going to say this, but also the sound design.
Mm-hmm.
I like when there was score, when there was Foley, when there was not.
When there was not,
Those were the moments that were like I could feel myself holding my breath. I could feel the people next to me holding their breath. That there was this collective tense moment that really upped the emotional stakes.
Except for when my kid goes, why is it, what happened to the sound? I'm like, shh, I'll tell you later.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
That's cute.
But look up the chicken wire and LEDs video for the collection of the infrared astrophage.
Then
for practical
go online
effects, it was amazing.
and search for Spitzer Space Image telescopes. Photos.
It was just an invitation to learn more. See, guys, that's what we were talking about at the top of this. So it asked, "Why is it so quiet?" I'll tell you later. Then you explain it later. And then it's a teachable moment.
Beautiful. And then we're going from how did they do it with practical effects to like where did they get the real thing? What are they modeling it after? I love it. Science is cool. Let's do it.
Science is cool.
Before spoilers, what alternate media would you recommend to people who really enjoyed Project Hail Mary? This could be a film, television show, novel, a song, video game. And I'll throw it to you first, Stephanie. What would you recommend to listeners and viewers?
If you liked the book, if you liked the movie, go check out The Real Deal. I'm no longer a NASA employee, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out NASA Plus, which is NASA television streaming, ad-free, huge catalog on demand, but also live events. And as of this moment, April 1, no fooling, the Artemis 2 mission is set to take off with a crew of 4 intrepid humans to go and circle the moon. This is the biggest step in human space exploration since the Apollo program.
Wow.
It will put the first woman, the first African American, and the first Canadian beyond the moon. And it is our next step in deep space exploration. And you can watch it. You can be there live, and you can stream it on your phone, Roku, Apple TV, anywhere you get your OTT media.
That sounds awesome.
Incredible. Yeah, seriously.
It does.
That's what I'm doing. I'm making sure I subscribe to that.
You
and,
just sold me
put it
on
my
that.
calendar. Yeah. No. That's amazing. Again, just what we're able to do, like not only are these space launches, but the fact that you can just stream stuff like this anywhere on any device is frankly just a miracle. It feels like.
And during cruise, they're going to be streaming. They're going to be live streaming from inside the capsule. They're going to be streaming from outside the capsule. You're going to see the moon. You're going to see Earth from a point of view that you may never have seen live before. Wow. And Reed, Christina, Victor, and Jeremy, they're the real deal. They're fantastic human beings, and I think they represent some of the best of us.
Oh, man. Love to hear that. So listeners, that's your main takeaway from this episode right there. Learn more, watch more, see the cool stuff that's happening. That said, Broccoli, I hate to pass it to you to follow up on that, but what else should people check out? They got to have some fun time between now and when the next launch is.
Well, I'm actually so glad you passed it to me because Stephanie teed it up for me perfectly. You can watch Artemis 2, but my next book I will be reading, and I haven't read it yet, but I know it's going to be good, will be Artemis by Andy Weir. Because I did hear that Lord and Miller do have the rights to that book, and they will going to make that film. And it's about a girl who wants to get out of her small town, but her small town just happens to be a colony on the moon. So
wow,
just sounds like it would be like another kind of really good one. So that kind of works perfectly with Stephanie's rec.
It's perfect, compatible. Man, Andy Weir, I really need to read these. He seems like the Michael Crichton, but for space is kind of the vibe I've got, right? Like where you get really, really into the science, but also is a good storyteller. Man, the recs are coming. I need to get on that train. Laurent Chapman, what should listeners, viewers check out if they enjoy Project Hail Mary?
Well, we mentioned them, but just for reemphasis, Gravity for the technical prowess. If you want something very similar, visually speaking, the problem solving momentum aspect of The Martian is present in, as we've kind of said, in varying degrees of success, but it's definitely in the film. And then I'd also mention Arrival again, just with the idea of the language barrier and then trying to find a way to communicate with something that you don't have the language for, but you can create a language together because there's other ways to communicate than just with the language that we have. There's other visual cues and nods and movement that I found a nice parallel of between these two movies. So Gravity, The Martian, Arrival.
Good stuff. There's no way I can talk. Oh yeah. Show and tell.
And I'm going to say, yes, the puppet show, right? If you haven't been to the Project Hail Mary official website, down in the lower right corner, there is a downloadable file. And if you have access to a 3D printer, even if you don't have one, your local library probably does, you can print your very own Xenonite spaceman. This gave me the impetus to actually learn how to use our 3D printer that we've had for many years, and my technically minded son and husband have been using. Well, this time I got in on the fun. It was a lot easier to use than I thought it was going to be, and now I have this cute little guy. Which there we go. Now I could do all kinds of puppet shows about space.
So there you go.
You two can communicate with Rocky. That's beautiful. Lastly, I don't know. I can't top that. Here's what I'll throw out there. So me and my wife, when we did our road trip moving up to Seattle, we stopped in Los Angeles for a couple of days, and we went to the Griffith Observatory. I'd been to the outside multiple times. I'd never been inside. Hey, if you think science is cool and want to learn about like the depths of the galaxy and what we can see with telescopes and all sorts of the crazy stuff blowing my mind, they have multiple films that play a day within the observatory. Highly, highly, highly recommend checking that out if you happen to be in the Los Angeles area. Yeah, sure. Go get your photo op in front of the observatory. Do your La La Land pose. I get it. That's great. But also, seriously, it's worth your time to go in and actually check out the awesome stuff inside, in addition to watching the films they have there. And this last one's a trash recommendation. But firstly, I'm always going to go to bat for Armageddon. It is an aggressively stupid movie that is like comfort food, and I've watched it on TV so many times. And also, yes, I do think that the commentary on the Criterion DVD with Ben Affleck might be the best work Ben Affleck has ever done in his entire career. If you don't know what I'm talking about, get on YouTube and look up Ben Affleck commentary on Armageddon. It is wild and hilarious. Yeah.
Fun fact, there is an active member of NASA's astronaut corps, Denise, astronaut by the name of Denise, and her last name is escaping me right now, but her background was working in offshore oil drilling rigs.
No way.
Before she became an astronaut. So, between that and the Near Earth Object Program Office that you saw in Don't Look Up, I mean, we're halfway there in real life.
Michael Bay was right.
Michael Bay was on to something.
I hate to admit that, but go ahead.
Not often. Not often. I also would say, but yes, so watch Armageddon, but also don't sleep on Deep Impact, the other movie that came out in the same year, also about NASA trying to save Earth from asteroids. Also, great, fun, dumb movie. I think I might like Deep Impact. Armageddon, more fun. Deep Impact hits more emotionally, I would say, if I was going to kind of compare the two, but both a good time. All right, listeners, viewers, thanks for tuning to our spoiler-free review. If you do not want to be spoiled on Project Hail Mary, go ahead and tune out now.
Cooper, what are you doing?
Docking.
Endurance rotation is 67, 68 RPM.
Okay, get ready to match our spin with the retro thrusters.
It's not possible.
No, it's necessary.
All right, are you there? Still there? Okay, go away. If you haven't seen the movie, go to the theater, check it out, and come back. So just to kick out the spoilers, I think, like I mentioned, one of the things that really stuck out to me is one of my favorite things, and it seemed like we're all kind of into the ideas, is the idea of how the film presents science and collaboration as sort of the key to overcoming an impossible problem. And that was another thing we saw with The Martian that's been mentioned a couple of times. I also think it's noteworthy that Grace is an unlikely candidate for the research, but he decides to commit, or at least he thinks he's unlikely. And he's an even more unlikely candidate to be on the space mission and is forced aboard. And I think, all this is what leads him to meet Rocky, which is the alien he must work with to discover the answer to killing the astrophage. So I wanted to just kind of pose the question, and we can get all the spoilers out now. Any part of the movie is on the table. But I mean, I wanted to see, like, from your guys' perspective, how is the film using Rocky as sort of a vehicle for the bigger, more optimistic themes of using, scientific discovery and collaborating with an unknown entity to problem solve? And go for it, Laron.
Well, I was going to say, I think it kind of underscores what we've kind of alluded to earlier in the episode, of this idea that he might seem like an unlikely candidate to do this extraordinary otherworldly thing, but really it's something that we all kind of possess in different, we all have our different strengths and our abilities to do that. And it sounds like Rocky being kind of a conduit in that regard, where maybe it seems unknowable, but maybe there's something that you contribute to this conversation and this sense of collaboration. And if we do it together, and as you're saying, leading with compassion and an openness to different perspectives in that way, that collectively we can create those kinds of those kinds of change. Maybe not one person by themselves, but maybe a group of people with different ideas and different strengths and different qualities in that sense.
Yeah. So even a middle school teacher can
Yes.
actually
A middle school teacher who does not want to do this mission and his hand is forced to go up there. And that's something I think that Gosling navigated very well. Like, he does come off as a smart and thoughtful person, who is even challenging this idea of what is it, non-H2O, um,
Non-water based life.
non-water based, life
Yeah.
forms. Like, he's willing to kind of buck the system in regarding like this is something that he truly believes. And then even when it's undercut, and even when he's up there in space, allegedly alone at the time, you're like, yeah, he might be out of his depth in many sense, but he has a scientific mind, and he is able to kind of go through the paces with everything and figure it out. And we believe him as he's discovering these things moment to moment, even if he's learning them for the first time. He has that investigative mind to be able to do so. So, like, again, just shows you that, that there is something that we all possess that we can contribute to that kind of change with scientific, but yeah.
Well, we can all participate in science.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, what's your take on this? Like, in terms of how we use like that interaction with Rocky as the vehicle for like trying to like, hey, humanity, here's how we problem solve meaningfully with science.
I love that they started with math. That is the universal language, and then from there to elements, right? One of the gifts that Rocky gives Grace in that xenonite canister is, he at first he thinks it's a crown, or is it some kind of weird handcuffs, and we got some jokes there, but then he figures out that it's two oxygen molecules, and the his background as a middle school science teacher serves him well through this, both in his resilience and patience, but also trying to figure out, where is this other entity coming from? Where's Rocky coming from? I know he's had to do that for years with his students, and he's willing to do it in a way that he wasn't willing to do it in the academic community. So the shared languages of these universal constants, math and science, that's where it starts. But then they do form an emotional bond, and that makes their resolution to save their home worlds that much greater. And yeah, I'm a big fan. You don't have to love your collaborators, but it certainly makes it a lot easier to be shoulder to shoulder, when using humor to trauma bond, to go off and to solve really, really difficult problems.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I think it's I hadn't considered that, actually. Like, he has to have the patience of a middle school teacher, and he has to come from a place of empathy in order to teach. Therefore, hey, this thing's trying to communicate. It doesn't seem hostile. So what is it doing? How can I might I figure out how to understand what it's doing? Yeah. And starting from that place of like, here's the problem. Let's like reverse engineer it using the tools of math, linguistics, all of these tools that he has in order to like kind of like eventually establish a line of communication with Rocky, which is the beginning of the collaboration that leads to them, overcoming the astrophage.
Right. They've got this shared mission,
Yeah. Shared mission. I love that too. And also, I mean, I think another thing that sticks out to me, and Brock, I'd be interested to hear what you thought about this too, is like at one point Rocky risks his life, which is not only his own life. If Rocky fails his mission, his entire planet is also doomed. So he actually risks his life in order to save Grace, which I found to be really beautiful. That was probably the moment I got the most emotional, was when he gets out of his little bubble into the Earth-like atmosphere. And I actually wasn't sure if he was going to make it, because I hadn't read the novel. I'm like, and the movie did a good job at like being like, well, we've seen him. He just lays there. We're not sure if that means he's dead or if he's recovering, because he doesn't have like the normal signs of life that we would expect on Earth. Anyway, I found that to be an especially emotional sequence in particular. But Brock, like, what did you think kind of about how the film sort of approached problem solving through that kind of like collaboration and empathy?
Yeah, no, and I in that scene you're talking about where he gets out of a Xenonite bubble to help Gosling, it's also like I also saw it as him almost, because like who knows how he would have got back to his ship, but it's almost he was gonna risk failing the mission on both their parts to save his friend too, instead of just thinking about finishing the mission. There's just so many ways you could have kind of taken it in that moment, which also kind of speaks to the bond that they had. And Stephanie, you talked about it too, like how they form their communication in the tunnel with how they do time and the stopwatch, and him going with like the clock that Rocky brings, and that's like the basis of how they form communication. And I love how you said it with you have to have the middle school teacher patience, because that's I never thought about that, and that's really funny. But I think it's just, you know, finding that trust in one another, because they needed each other for the materials that they don't possess in their own on their own worlds. Like with the Xenonite, nothing, that entire mission would have failed if not for Xenonite. But also Xenonite then becomes the problem for the solution. And so the things that Gosling brings to the table is also what saves them. So what saved them initially is what dooms them. And then what Gosling brings to the table is what then again saves the mission. So
The
I
real
just really liked
MacGuffin is the friends we made along the way.
exactly.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
so it's just I don't know, it was cool. Like, because again, with my brain, I'm like, you see a spaceship out in space, you're like, that's an alien, and their sole mission is to hurt me. Because like just from anything you just growing up. So I mean, even like if they're not, even if you're a real astronaut, if you see something in space, you're gonna probably freak out and get scared. I don't know. I guess if you're an astronaut, you're probably built for curiosity, like Stephanie said, so they might get excited, but I would freak.
But I mean, in general, I would say, human
Yeah.
nature, especially as has been projected in pop culture, is largely like aliens are coming. We're just going to immediately assume worse intent, a malintent. They want resources. Well, they're going to
Yeah.
kill us to get the resources, because that's what, again, cynicism. That's what we would do if we were like caught in a rut. We would kill them to
Right.
get the resources, right? Like, that's like the worst part of humanity. So
Yeah.
we automatically assume, oftentimes, that something we don't know or understand would do the worst thing we would do in that scenario, so that we must like act defensively. Whereas I think it's interesting where Grace comes at it from that curiosity, where, that again is somewhat unique to being an astronaut, but also to being a middle school teacher. He's not, even at one point though, he sees the capsule coming. He's like, well, it could be a message, could be a
Be a
bomb.
bomb.
Mhm.
It's and I love that the movie kind of zags a little bit with that. And I used to bring it back to the moment when Rocky rescues Grace. I also wonder if there is something like even deeper, which is like, how can we hope to save humanity on like a macro level if we cannot first save humanity at the micro level? Like, if we have to be willing to put aside our own goals to protect another entity in order to sort of preserve like the thing about our species that we love and care about anyway, right? I don't know. I'm getting waxing a little metaphorical and reading into it a little bit, but the whole exchange was really, really beautiful and made me think it's like, maybe it's why Grace goes back to save Rocky. If Grace doesn't go save Rocky, it's like, well, this guy saved my life, and I wouldn't even have the answer to the solution without him. So do I selfishly just go back to Earth, or do I sacrifice what's best for me in order to save Rocky, who had already saved? I don't know. I just like that. There's like this really
Yeah.
interesting idea about like putting others first, even like the mission, and to a certain extent, the personal mission, and sort of like separating that from the larger mission. Anyway, I'm rambling about a lot of different things related to the interaction with them. Well, maybe here's a different question for you guys. Do you think this film earns its optimism? Because I think we've kind of talked about there's like some tonal, like this is very light, goes down easy. Sometimes it seems like the solutions are a little too easy. And Brock, I'll throw it to you first, just because I know that was a thing, like you mentioned, that maybe the solutions came a little too easy. Do you think the film earns the right to be optimistic, though?
I do. I mean, when we continue talking about it, like to put in all the science and math and stuff, it might have drugged the film down and kind of pulled away from that optimism or that shared chemistry that Rocky and Grace had. But no, I mean, I do. I think it earns its optimism.
Ron, how about you?
I think in the context of the story that it's telling, yeah, sure, I think it does, or it does enough, I should say. I think my overall critique with the optimism is more it, it's under the idea that maybe it's kind of hard for me to believe that our current world government would be united long enough to support or follow through with a project like Hail Mary. I'm not convinced of that. So that's where a certain degree of suspension of belief has to come into play to really buy into the story that they're telling here. And I think that there are a lot of charming and well earned laughs in this. I just think that when it tried to switch into kind of more emotional beats or the we're in grave danger moments, I was a little less convinced because of the film's, again, kind of sugar overload of charm, humor, and whimsy. But that being said, those aren't negative qualities to have in a movie. And I think that the objective of having optimism in this movie is achieved in that sense. I just think that as a personal viewer with the story, that it took me in and out of that because it was overly genial to the point where I was like, are they really in danger, or the movie's leading me to think that we're having too good of a time, they're not going to ruin it for us, sort of thing. So that's the only thing. I really do think it's just a tone thing than it is a story thing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Right. Yeah. I feel that it tone and pacing a little bit, because there's also the pacing where like it kind of swaps really fast. Where you're
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
oh, here, totally over here. Oh, story speeds up real fast at the end. But Stephanie, what do you think? Do you think the film owns? Do you think it earns rather the optimism?
I think it does. I think it does in focusing on the relationship between Grace and Rocky. We don't know what's happening back on Earth. We don't know what's happening back on Arid. Thanks to, some hand waving again and time dilation, much less time has passed for our two space travelers than has passed on their home planets. By the time John, Paul, George, and Ringo get back with the solution, who knows what's waiting at Earth? All we know about is what's happening on the Hail Mary and Blip A and what's happening in this relationship. And I think that if I were to meet an alien, I would hope that they have as good a sense of humor as Rocky does. That is like the greatest anthropomorphic gift that Andy Weir could have given this character, is the same kind of sarcastic, nerdy humor one naturally finds among engineers. And you've got Rylan the scientist and Rocky the engineer out to save the stars. It's audacious, and I think the only way that you tackle a problem that big is with humor. Even if it is, if you were to think objectively about the stakes, might seem misplaced. It almost functions like an armor to me.
There was a line in the film, I can't remember, it made me laugh. One that notably made me laugh in the movie, where I think it's Rocky or Grace says something to Rocky, and he says it sarcastically or in a, and he's obviously, because of the language barrier, he doesn't understand sarcasm. He's like, oh, sarcasm, confusing. Because he doesn't know that he doesn't mean what he's saying literally. And I think that's funny, because sometimes we get into those, if you don't know a person personally, you don't know whether they're being sarcastic or not. And that's a nuance of our language that, that's there. So.
Yeah. I appreciated that as well. Well, let's move right into the ending because I think a couple of other things that are either pluses or hangups for us might come clear in this section here. So again, the film concludes. Grace has to choose between going to Earth or rescuing Rocky. So essentially, as Brock already mentioned, he discovers that the material that Rocky had built was like the astrophage adapted to the material and was able to leak out. And he had determined that actually would have killed Rocky on his mission home. So he only has enough fuel to get back to either Earth or to get to Rocky. He chooses to go back for Rocky. He does send all the materials back to Earth, and we get the nice little scene back on Earth, which, Ron, this was made in the Obama era. It would have landed different. I will say that. I think so too. Yeah. The optimism. Yeah.
Fair.
Anyway, well,
we did have it one time. Once upon a time, we had it.
Yeah. We could believe that world governments could come together to problem solve. Anyway, neither here nor there. So yes, the materials do make it back to Earth so they can keep their mission, but then Grace rescues Rocky and ends up going back to a biodome on Iridia, or, I believe, again, based on the film, it's a little ambiguous, but he's in a biodome that resembles Earth that they built for him, and he's teaching Iridian students. And here's the thing I really want to dig into here, because it's revealed in that last section. They've had like the Earth story playing back through like flashbacks throughout the film. And the last one we get is basically, that's when we realize, Grace was forced to go on this mission. He had no agency, really. His answer was, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. Obviously he does. Yay. But there was a really interesting contrast, I thought, between how humans treated him and the Iridians treated him. Mostly that, like, he's like, can I just think about this for a little bit? You got 3 hours, and we get this contrast with Rocky at the end. Hey, we've got your stuff ready to go back home. And he's like, can I think about it for a while? And he's like, you can think about it as long as you need. And that was a really interesting contrast that really stuck out to me, just kind of speaking to like human nature. And I wanted to see what you guys thought about that. So Stephanie, I'll start with you. What did you think sort of about the ending here?
So I actually like the ending in the film more than I like the ending in the book. This is a spoiler free, or no, this is the spoiler zone. So I'm going to go ahead and spoil that part of the book for you, if you don't mind.
Go for
that
it.
line about take all the time you want. Yes, you should take a lot of time. With the underlying subtext, you're my friend. I want you to stay. I enjoy your company. You can go home, but I don't really want you to. That's not there. Like the whole we've patched up the ship, we've made more fuel, you can go back, not in the book. And I liked it. I liked it more in the film. I did. I liked his reaction when Strutt says, I hope you can understand why I have to do this. And the screaming, and then no, and the fit, he's running. Made him more believable to me. If it had been this heroic, like, I don't want to die, but I'll do it for the good of humanity, I don't think I would have bought it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It lend itself not only to like just, I think, a general human authenticity, the reaction most people would probably have if they're being forced to do something they don't want to do, but it's also consistent with the character we've seen throughout the entire film. Like, even when he gets on the mission, he's almost reluctant to believe in himself that he can do it, Brock, what did you make of the ending?
I agree with Stephanie. I like the ending in the movie a lot. And also, I don't even think in the book, I don't think it shows the Beatles even getting back to Earth or what happens. You're just left to assume that they make it back. You don't even know.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool
like
to
ships
see
in a
that.
bottle, right? Or message in a
Yeah.
bottle.
So it's kind of cool to see that that there was ice and like the sun had started doing its thing, but there was still hope. And I like seeing Strat in that moment getting that message. I thought that was kind of cool. And in the book, another major thing with him being forced to go is that he has what's called a coma gene. So people being in a coma for that long, lots of people would die. And there's only a certain amount of people in the world who have a coma gene that could sustain that length of time without getting like brain damage or dying or any of that. And he was one of those people. And so the pool was even smaller than what was even made to be seen in the film. So him still refusing to sacrifice his one person to save 6 billion people just spoke to the cowardice, and that he even said, he's like, I don't have that. I'm not brave. I can't do that. So that turning into kind of the strength at the end, whenever he could go home and could go back to the place that he wanted to stay and wanted to die on, regardless of how long he had on Earth, to sacrifice himself for another planet of things, people, whatever, Iridians that he had never even met. Was kind of cool that he would do that, not knowing that they could make him a biodome and let him live there for the rest of his life. So I don't know. It was kind of cool. What was a weakness then became like his strength, and all he had to do was find the right extraterrestrial to make it worth it. Not 6 billion people. He just needed one rock-shaped friend.
Well, and also like he finds, you kind of see the arc because he himself, he has proven to himself by that point that he can do it, right? Like, there's all this stuff. He's afraid to go to space because he doesn't believe he can do it. And that's the whole voyage we see of him in the movie leading up to when he meets Rocky and then working with Rocky, is him sort of like proving to himself that, oh, I can do it now. So seeing how that sort of mindset shift at the end is really notable. Yeah.
But in the book, I don't think he even remembers that he didn't want to go until a little further in. And then he starts remembering more. And then he's like, oh crap, I didn't even want to do this. And it's a completely like mind F on him. Cause like, that's why the book is so good, because of the breakups of flashbacks to present time on the ship and how they really flow in and out of each other to kind of help the story it's telling at the moment. So that's what the book does really well, is it makes those time jumps like flow in and out of each other so perfectly that like it doesn't feel jarring. It's really beautiful how it was written.
Yeah. Oh, so clarifying question, and this is actually a question I had, random small thing. The coma gene thing, that's really interesting. Is that why the other two astronauts don't make it? I was a little unclear about that.
They blew up.
They've got
They were
it
doing
too.
experiments. They had it too. Oh yeah, no,
Oh.
sorry. I thought you meant the ones that blew up. Yeah, no, those
So
other two had it as
all
well.
3 of them had, well, all 7, let's say, because you had the primary crew, the backup crew, and Ryland Grace, who was backup to the backup, even though we didn't know it. They've all got this coma gene. But even with the gene, the other 2 didn't make it. And so, like, one theory is that the fact that he gets on the ship already in a coma state, a medically induced coma state, whereas the other 2 are awake when they launch and then go into coma mid-flight, that maybe that introduced a problem. Or maybe, the gene isn't as, foolproof as they thought.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the messy thing about science sometimes, right? Like it's not the thing, it's probably not the things the problem, it's the things you don't know. Like, that's interesting, because that was the thing. I was like, oh, the other 2 science, even the second time, I was like, oh, those other 2 astronauts are dead. Why are they dead again? I'm not really sure. But okay, interesting. Well, Laurent, bring it back to the ending. What did you make of the ending?
Yeah, I enjoyed the ending. At first, I was having a hard time accepting that he would have. I mean, until it's obviously ultimately revealed that he would do this mission. Like why, like what his life, while maybe he wasn't the happiest or what have you, didn't seem so desolate to the point where he was just like, well, my life's invaluable. I mean, not valuable. So sure, I'll do it. So I was having a hard time being convinced that he would do this. And then when it's ultimately revealed that it was against his will, I was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. But then that made all of his choices all the more meaningful, because it meant that now he is cognizant of these things and he's still choosing moment to moment, you know what I mean, to be selfless, in that regard, and so that was something that made all of his choices, I think, hit a little bit more. Really, because they were against his will, because he didn't have to, could have resigned and given up, and he never did. So that was something that I really spoke to his character in that way. So, but yeah, I enjoyed the ending, and it was a sweet kind of again, kind of wholesome way to resolve everything.
And if
He's
you can
just
believe it, Strat in the book is way colder. They don't have these
Yeah.
little glances at
Oh,
each other.
I
She
read
100%.
she does
I
not sing
I read that
karaoke.
she was stoic and that they did a lot of changing to make her more sympathetic on screen.
Mhm.
And also, can we just shout out Sandra Hüller
Yeah.
singing Harry Styles'
yes.
Sign of the Time? That
100%.
feels like an important cultural moment.
I think she
But
said she picked that the night before she was
oh,
supposed to
really?
do it.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. She has a very
After
lovely voice too. I
Yeah.
was surprised by
do
that too.
doing a gut check with her daughter.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Apparently, she told the producers that she would do it if she got to pick the song, and then she went and did the check with her daughter to be like, "Is this still relevant? Is this a good choice?" And kid
Yeah.
was like,
Mhm.
"Yep, yep, go for it,
There
mom."
was just briefly, there was an omission that I read that was really interesting to me that was not in the book about her character, where I guess allegedly because of the choices that she did with the Hail Mary mission, she was imprisoned. Is that correct? Like, she was imprisoned at one point by the government, and then they had, like, a tattoo in the story, not in the book, but in the movie that since they weren't able to touch on that subplot that was supposed to be like a stand-in for that particular moment, because it was a V with a line across it, which in French, I guess, meant, oh, I had it written down, but yes, it basically life without parole or something like that, and they weren't able
Huh.
to touch on it. So I thought that
'Cause
was an interesting thing. These are what the
in the
filmmakers were talking about in one of the
yeah,
interviews. I found
I
interesting.
she got hauled into court.
Yeah.
She gets sued for what Carl Sagan probably should or would have been sued for, in terms of, like, copyright infringement and not seeking, licensing agreements before putting media on a spaceship. He did it with the Voyagers, the Golden Records in real life. She did it with the computer system where she took, like, basically all of humanity's knowledge, and she's like, "I don't know what this crew is gonna need, so I'm gonna give them every resource that we
Hmm.
have."
Okay.
So there's a scene with her in court. I do not remember her being in prison. That
Okay.
V
There
with
was
the
Oh,
line
man.
through it,
it
though?
was the filmmakers. They were talking about how
Okay.
there was something they wanted to include from the book. They just weren't able to do so. So they relegated it to just a symbolic tattoo that they put on, that a tattoo that she didn't have in the book, but was supposed to be a nod to the readers that, hey, we couldn't do that thing, but this is supposed to tell you that the backstory's there. It's implied instead, like,
Huh.
but yeah,
Okay. The character is, an Iridian character. Um, and it gets explained in the clock sequence in the book, and it also comes back in the numbering of the final chapter, that V with the line through it.
okay. All right.
I really need to read the novel. I
You should
also heard
read
at
it.
one point they talk about using climate, like global warming, as a failsafe for like actually slowing down the cooling of the
Yes.
planet, and they like
Yes.
blow up Antarctica or something.
Mhm.
I was like,
They lay a
that would have been
bunch
pretty
of
cool to have seen in a
nukes.
movie. I'm sure it would have been very expensive, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get
And they
this
nuke
climate
the sun.
modeler. Yeah, they nuke a ice shelf, shove it off into the ocean to, release a whole bunch of methane and warm up the planet to buy them some more time before,
Okay.
the little, John Paul, George, and Ringo come back
Yeah.
with hopefully a solution.
Mhm. And
Mm.
how they breed all the astrophage in that short amount of time is a huge part of the book. They, like, put solar panels in the Saharan desert, and, like, they came up with this huge thing to breed astrophage at, like, a astronomical level. And so, like, again, some things you can't put everything in the movie, but some things were just so cool in the book that were just so smart, and just, like, the ways they figured things out. Like, it was exciting in the book, and I feel like it would have been just as exciting, because it's like these just scientific breakthrough after scientific breakthrough, because humanity's on the line, and what can we do? And they're pulling in all these other experts, where
Yeah.
it's not just Grace, but they're like, these people are inspired by Grace, or he did one thing, and then that made them realize they could do this. I don't know. It was really just
Yeah.
really cool.
They do go to prison to get the guy,
Mm.
who knows about the black body radiation to make the
That's right.
big energy production in the Sahara. So they do go
That's
to
right.
prison. It is just a visit, and then they get a guy out.
I got you.
Wow.
I see. I
Holy
see.
cow.
Okay. Okay.
Laurent, I think you and I just need to go read the
We should just
Andy
read the
Weir
book.
novel. Yeah,
That's what it
at this
sounds like.
point. Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty awesome.
Like
It's
another
awesome.
spoiler is that Ryland Grace gets a whole bunch of astronaut training. He goes to Johnson Space Center for years and does stuff in the neutral buoyancy lab, that giant swimming pool, under the pretext of like, oh, you have to test this scientific equipment. But he's also learning how to do a spacewalk.
Okay, Stephanie, this might be a great note to end on, actually. As a person who's worked at social media at NASA, you're telling me, because the movie just told me all that cool stuff you just talked about was just for social media selfies. Is that not the case?
It is not. It is not. No, did we capitalize on some awesome, video footage and stills that came out of it? That is absolutely true. But those astronauts go through a lot. They go through a lot, and they are they are extraordinary humans in a lot of different ways. Me and my motion sickness, probably not leaving the planet as much as I'd like to, but my hat is off to them.
Yeah, for sure.
That's amazing stuff. I thought that was a funny nod. Did you like, oh, all that space training you're talking about, that's just for selfies. You don't need that.
A really good selfie.
Yeah. But I think it was also just like their way of trying to like get him to get on board. Like, no, you don't need, don't worry about the training. You just get on the ship.
It's also, you can do that thing where Earth is like in your little palm hand. You just have it right there in the distance.
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
Like we do with the sun, or everything else. Yeah.
Well, good stuff, guys. We've talked for almost 2 hours about Project Hail Mary. So much more we could discuss. There's so much we weren't able to cover. I do want to give everyone a chance. Is there anything in particular you guys would like to call out before we wrap up today that maybe listeners might need to know about before checking out the movie?
Oh, fun Easter egg. Look out for the plaques in the movie. There's a sequence where Ryland is just exploring the ship, and he finds this series of shiny metal plaques that are engraved with different designs that are a nod back to Carl Sagan and the Golden Record, and before that, the Pioneer mission. I've got little representations.
Ooh.
Like we put messages to aliens on the outside of the ship. Carl Sagan, I think, was one of the eternal optimists who was like, no, we should communicate with them. And a lot of people actually mad about this. This is a pulsar map that also shows up in Project Hail Mary, not in the book, but in the movie. It is a map of the 16 closest pulsars to Earth. It's basically, we are here. And a lot of people were like, you shouldn't do that, because what if they're not friendly? You just gave them a map of where we live.
Listen, empathy. Lead with empathy.
The biggest difference is that these plaques are on the outside of the spacecraft where aliens could see them. The filmmakers decided to put those plaques on the inside where the crew could see them. So were they there in case their brains were mushy when they woke up from their comas? I don't know. I just think it's a really fun Easter egg to go look for.
Very nice. Deep cut, great Easter egg, and super cool. You had some examples to show us today. All right, final word, Brock or Laurent, anything else?
I would say go see the movie, but it looks like 2 weekends in, all of you did. But if you haven't yet, go see it. It's a lot of fun, and see it in the biggest theater you can.
Yeah,
with the best
absolutely.
sound system.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it already, absolutely go check it out and drop the extra money on the IMAX or the Dolby or what have you in order to see it with the optimal viewing. And I saw it a second time and I have zero regrets. So not worth. It's definitely good enough to justify a second warning, at least in my book. All right, well, guys, hey, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you all taking some time out of your day to talk with us about Project Hail Mary. Stephanie, first time guest, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people follow you and all the great things you're doing as you return back to your life as a civilian?
As a science communicator, you can find me at Stephist, STEPHIST, wherever you get your socials. And if you're curious about all the cool stuff that NASA is doing, they're at NASA. Also, anywhere you get your socials.
All right, check her out. Check Stephanie out. All amazing work. Brockness Monster, Broccoli. Hey, just want to say, man, I'm really glad you're here and you weren't murdered by Ghostface. I know I've said it a couple times, but this is also a soft plug. You guys should go listen to our Scream 7 podcast. But Broccoli took one for the team. Not only did he see a very bad Scream movie, but he also took some actual stabbings. You got to check out the episode to see more. Glad you're still with us, man. Where can people follow up with you and all the great things you're doing?
Ghostface knew what I was going to say about that movie, so he tried to keep it quiet.
Tried to save you.
I'll be back for 8. They can find me at Brockness_monster on Instagram, and then also Broccoli Design.
All right. Awesome stuff. Always great sharing the mic with you, Brock. LaRon Chapman, where can people find you?
You can follow me for more reviews and podcasts here at thecinematropolis.com. I'm also on Letterboxd at black_cinna_man.
Letterboxd, check us out. I'm C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. You can also find me on Instagram using the same handle, or just go to thecinematropolis.com. Go to the Cinematropolis YouTube. YouTube is a new channel for us, giving us a subscribe and commenting. Big boost. Check us out there. Again, cinematropolis.com, Cinematropolis YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're going to stay in the galaxy for the next episode. It's going to be a short little bonus episode coming at you later this week, but I could not, in good conscience, not talk about Super Mario Galaxy. So you'll have a little bonus review coming from me later this week as a huge diehard Nintendo fan. But we'll otherwise be back in 2 weeks with our review of the A24 drama that's getting a lot of talk on the internet. The drama. Must be dramatic. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you again next time.